Okay, it's time for us to return to our seats and be ready for the second part of the program this morning. Great, so the second part is going to be presented by Anna Thompson. You know, we used to know her by a different surname. I need to have a big space, give a bit space to my brain that now she's Thompson. She's Mrs. Thompson now. But she's very well known by all the Newbold community. I remember when she came, you know, late teens, and she has not changed. She's just grown into a beautiful woman, but you never change over the years. It's
very kind.
So Anna has a degree in psychology, and then she carried on doing her studies, and she has a master's degree in nutrition. So this empowers Anna to combine psychology with nutrition, which I look very much forward to hear the talk. So Anna, I'm sure we're going to be blessed by your talk.
Thank you so much, Isabel, for the invitation to speak here today and for the very kind introduction. So, as Isabel said, I'm Anna Thompson. I'm a associate registered nutritionist, and I currently work in public health. And Beatrice and I didn't really necessarily sit down and plan what we were going to talk about, but I think my presentation follows so nicely after what Beatrice has talked about, building resilience for our mental health. And she touched a little bit on physical health and nutrition, but we'll just look at that topic in a little bit more detail. How to feed our brains to maintain good mental health. So, today we're going to talk about the gut microbiome and how to feed our guts. There'll be some time at the end for Q&As if you have any questions. And for those of you who are here in person, you're very fortunate because you'll also get a little light refreshment at the end. So we'll just start off with the important thing. Sorry, I forgot I had the clicker. All right, perfect. Oh, just go back. So that's today's discussion. So we'll just start off with the important thing, which is that the information I provide today is general advice. I won't be able to address any individual questions or concerns during the Q&A, but if you have any questions generally about nutrition, I'm more than happy to answer those. And for anyone who's living with a mental health condition, the information that you hear today is not to be taken as a replacement for any medication or therapy that someone might be taking. So, admin out of the way. Let's start. So, back in 1825, this very influential French lawyer, physician, and food writer said, "Tell me what you eat, and I will tell you who you are." And I'm sure we've heard the similar saying, "You are what you eat," right? And we generally think about it in terms of physical health, how to prevent obesity, diabetes, heart disease, all of those physical ailments. But is it also true that if I change what I eat, I can change who I am? In other words, if I improve my diet, will my mood improve? Well, the answer is yes. And I'm going to demonstrate this by talking to you a little bit about the SMILES trial, which was conducted 4 years ago now by a team in Australia. Now, in the world of nutrition, we are very much moving towards focusing on a lot of research on gut health, but also how diet influences our mental health. And basically what the scientists wanted to answer is that question: if I improve my diet, if I change my diet, will I improve my mood? And so they set out to create a very scientifically robust study. It was a randomized controlled trial, which is basically like the gold standard of research. And what they did is they recruited people from the community who had clinical depression. And they initially recruited about 166 potential participants, but in the end they narrowed it down to 67 because they had very strict criteria as to who could be included in the study. And all of the participants were people living with clinical depression. They also had generally not very healthy diets. In fact, they actually had to disqualify some participants because their diets were too healthy for the study. And what they did is they split them into two groups. And one group received a sort of form of social support on a weekly basis, because we know that social support is one of the things that is really good for people who are living with depression. And the other group got to see a dietitian. So because of the nature of the relationship between dietitian and client, there is that element of social support there as well. But in addition to that, they also received advice on how to improve their diets. And so the diet that was very much recommended to the participants in the dietitian group was basically a modified Mediterranean diet. And apologies, the next slide is a little bit blurry. It wasn't great quality when I initially got this. But essentially, the Mediterranean diet is based on eating a lot of whole grains, fruits, vegetables, a little bit of dairy, olive oil, so trying to avoid saturated fats, nuts. So those were prescribed to be consumed on a daily basis, and then on a weekly basis to try and limit their alcohol intake, to try and have 3 to 4 servings of legumes, 3 to 4 servings of lean red meat, at least 2 servings of fish, particularly oily fish, because we know that promotes good brain health, poultry, eggs, and any extras like desserts or, those really indulgent things, limited to less than 3 servings per week. And the participants were also encouraged to engage in daily exercise, enjoying meals with others, and drinking plenty of water as well. And I'll touch on it a little bit more later, but enjoying your food is a big part of building good mental health as well. So, that's the study. What did they find? Well, I think even the scientists themselves were quite surprised, given the small sample size and the kind of statistical dynamics with that, that there was actually a significant improvement in the depressive symptoms of the patients or of the participants who were in the dietary intervention group compared to those who were only receiving the social support. And this was a revolutionary study because it was kind of the first to demonstrate that, yes, diet does affect our mental health, and it can actually be used to improve mental health. And this has now snowballed into a lot of different pieces of research around diet and how it can specifically support people who are living with mental health conditions, but it's also important for us to look generally at how we can maintain good mental health through our diet. So today we're going to focus on the gut microbiome. Did it work? Let's see, thank you. So, there is your gut. It's saying hello. I'm sure you've probably heard, you should eat this because it's good for your gut. And even at the supermarket now, I've seen foods that are labeled as being good for gut health. So I'm sure that this is something that you're, at least a little bit familiar with. But what is the gut? And specifically the gut microbiome? Well, essentially, it's a community of trillions of bacteria, but not just bacteria, but viruses and fungi. And some of these are pretty ancient. And we have lots of different kinds of bacteria as well. Some good, some not so good, but it's a huge community. And we're still working on understanding and getting to know what the gut microbiome is. Now, some of the functions of the gut microbiome are that it actually can produce vitamins, such as vitamin K. It produces hormones and also neurotransmitters, such as serotonin. So that might come as a surprise to you because we generally think of neurotransmitters as being produced in our brains. But the gut has come to be known as our second brain because of all the different functions that it has. Our gut microbiome also produces little guys that can travel around and communicate to different organs, such as our liver, our heart, our brain. And most importantly, the gut microbiome is unique to you. So it's almost like it's a sort of internal fingerprint, if you will. Even twin studies have shown that your GM, your gut microbiome, is completely unique to you. So the makeup of the different kinds of bacteria and viruses and fungi. And there are a number of things that influence the makeup of our gut. Obviously our diet, which we'll be talking about today. But your gut is actually something that's developed from before you're born. But the makeup of your gut is pretty much kind of firmed up in those early years of life. And even the form or the manner in which you are born affects the makeup of your gut microbiome. So whether you were born via C-section or vaginal birth, research shows that the makeup of your gut microbiome is affected. Also, if you're thinking about if you have small children, thinking about how to improve their gut health, one of the things that you can let them do is be exposed to dirt. So if you do things like gardening outside or just kind of letting them play outdoors, then that's actually one of the ways that they can build strong and healthy guts. I'm not saying that we shouldn't wash our hands or practice good hygiene, but that exposure to nature and dirt is actually really good as children, but also as adults to improve the makeup and the health of our gut microbiome. And even things like pets, so if you have pets, like dogs who are really keen to come and show their love by licking you, then that is actually really good for your gut microbiome as well. All right, so let's look a little bit more specifically at the gut and the brain. Beatrice touched on this as well, but inflammation, we kind of generally know that it's the root of many diseases, heart disease, diabetes, etc., including depression. And that link between depression and inflammation was one of the, oops, did I do something? Is one of the ways that we kind of researchers were like, oh, there's this link between inflammation and depression and the gut. Let's explore this a little bit more. You may have heard of the vagus nerve, which kind of travels down from our brains into our guts. So that's one of the ways that the gut and the brain communicate. And actually, a lot of our digestion is managed by the enteric nervous system, which is basically this highway of 50 million nerves that's kind of incorporated inside our guts. And some research on, I think it was guinea pigs, actually showed that when they had just a little bit of the guinea pig's intestine kind of on its own and just fluid, it was actually kind of alive and managing that digestion on its own. So it's kind of creepy a little bit to think that there's this thing inside you that has a life of its own and a mind of its own as well. The gut can also reflect our emotions, and I've certainly experienced this. If I feel stressed, I often tend to get a stomach ache. I don't know if you can relate. But there's a scientist called Emmerin Mayer, and he describes the gut as the theater in which the drama of our emotions unfolds. So if you're feeling angry or stressed, then your stomach starts to contract and increase acid production. So I think we're not even fully aware of the full dynamic and the connection between the gut and the brain. But what research is showing is that it's definitely there. So how do we feed our gut and maintain resilience when it comes to our mental health? Essentially, we have to eat more plants. And Beatrice touched on this as well, that research suggests that we should be eating or aiming to eat 30 different types of plants every week. And I hope that by the end of this talk, you won't quite feel so overwhelmed with that figure, because as Beatrice said, I think we may struggle to name 30 different types of vegetables, but it is possible with a little bit of planning. But what we mean by eat more plants is to have a plant-based diet, and I don't necessarily mean a vegan diet, but a diet that mostly focuses on eating plants. So the first type of plant, if you will, I want to look at today is to feed on fiber. So I'm sure you've all heard that fiber is really important for our health. And I just want to give you some practical examples and ways that we can feed on fiber. So the first one is to eat lots of legumes. So beans, lentils, chickpeas, peas, that whole family of plants. And you can add them to soups, stews, or even bolognese. And I'm looking specifically at the uni students because I know typically that's kind of one dish that a lot of uni students make, bolognese. And what you can do is, if you want to make like a vegetarian bolognese, then you can skip out the mince altogether and just use lentils. Or you can kind of do half and half, so half soy mince or meat mince, but also just throw a tin of lentils in there as well, and that automatically increases your fiber intake. You can do the same with lasagna and other things as well. So eat lots of legumes. The next is to eat more fruit and veg, and I'm sure that we're all very familiar with the government's recommendation to get your 5 a day. Research shows that we should be eating at least 5 portions of fruit and veg. Really, we should be aiming for 7 to 10. But if you're, look, eating and our diets is a journey, right? So wherever you are on your journey, if 5 is a big goal for you, then start with 5. And when we talk about 5 a day in terms of fruit and veg, ideally you would have 2 portions of fruit and 3 of vegetables. So try to get more vegetables. And when it comes to things like potatoes, carrots, even pumpkin, you don't need to peel the vegetables because you're just kind of losing nutrients and fiber, but also it helps to reduce food waste as well. So what we have at home, I have like a little silicone brush, and I just scrub my carrots really well before I use them, but I don't bother peeling them. And that's one way to increase your fiber intake. The next is to eat more whole grains. So this is, I'm sure you've heard this advice a lot, right? So this is things like make sure that you include oats and different types of grains in your diet. So brown rice, spelt, barley, all of those different grains. Don't be afraid to experiment. Quinoa as well. And whole grains are a really good source of fiber, which then our gut microbiome or our gut bacteria likes to feed on and makes it really happy. Nuts and seeds as well are also a really good source of fiber. And one thing that you might want to do if you struggle to kind of include a lot of nuts and seeds in your diet is to maybe have like a little bowl of mixed seeds on your table, and anytime you eat a meal like a salad or even a pasta dish, anything that you're eating, just throw a little sprinkle of seeds on top of your plate. Now, in terms of the kind of general guidelines of how much fiber we should be eating, it's 30 grams a day, which again can sound a little bit overwhelming, but this essentially could look like 2 pieces of fruit, 5 portions of veg, 3 portions of whole grains. So if you have maybe oatmeal for breakfast, whole grain bread, with your sandwich at lunch, and then maybe brown rice or whole grain pasta for dinner, and then 1 to 2 portions of nuts, seeds, or legumes. If fiber is not something that you have a lot of in your diet, I strongly recommend that you start slow. So don't don't aim for the 30 straight away. Gradually increase your fiber intake, because if you do too much too soon, then you might experience some discomfort and kind of not symptoms that you want to experience. Let's put it that way. So feed on fiber. The next thing we need to consider when we talk about eat more plants is diversity. So we've got a lot of different types of bacteria in our gut microbiome, and they all have different favorite foods. And so we have to make sure that we keep all of the bacteria in our gut happy, which means eating a variety of plant sources. And so diversity is key. So if you're making a salad, for the sake of convenience, but also feeding your gut, you could use pre-mixed salad bags, because those tend to have, sometimes they have like grated carrots or different types of lettuces. Or if you get the kind of bag with the pre-mixed veg for stir fry, then you have a lot more diversity already. You can also, again, if you're experimenting with adding more fiber, trying out new grains. It used to be quite difficult to get kind of more unusual grains, but they're a lot more common now in supermarkets. So things like quinoa, frike, barley, spelt pearls, etc. So you could either maybe mix those in with a bit of rice if you're having curries or stews, or you could just have them on their own in salads, or as an alternative to rice. We already talked about adding mixed seeds to your meals, and experiment with different flavors. And one of the key things to increase the diversity in your diet is to get inspired. So maybe if you've got some cookbooks at home that are gathering some dust, you can open them up and just have a look at some recipes to help inspire you. Sometimes, especially if life is really busy, you can kind of get in a bit of a cooking rut, or you end up kind of cooking the same things. So sometimes just taking a step back, getting some new inspiration for things that you can cook will also help you to get some diversity. And the slide is really some inspiration for you, the different types of plants that are available for us to eat. When we talk about diversity, also different, so yes, have different kinds of vegetables, but also different colored vegetables. So don't just have red peppers, have some yellow and green ones. You have white cabbage, green cabbage, red cabbage. If your budget allows it, you can even buy those fancy purple carrots or purple broccoli and things like that. Or if you grow your own food, you know, there's a lot of different unusual things that you can grow. So just get a bit creative on how you can increase diversity in your diet. The next advice is to add flavor. So we often talk about eating, you know, lots of fruit, veg, and whole grains, and nuts and seeds. But it's also important to remember things like herbs and spices. They do count as one of those 30 different plant sources that you should have per week. And herbs and spices not only add flavor and make food interesting, but they're also very rich in polyphenols, which are basically a type of antioxidant, but it's also one that our gut bacteria like to feed on as well. So yes, add herbs and spices. And fermented foods as well are another food that our gut bacteria really like to feed on. But not only that, but fermented foods themselves contain live microbes or probiotics that also help to maintain good gut health generally. So if you're from a sort of Eastern European background, that I'm sure that you're used to eating a lot of different fermented foods. There's also, I mean, fermented foods are really in every culture and every, you know, every part of the world that you go to, there's some sort of fermented food. So in East Asia, you've got kimchi in Korea, but also soy sauce is actually a fermented food. Tofu, tempeh, things like that. And, you know, fermented foods can be a little bit funky, so it can be an acquired taste if you're not used to them. But they can also add flavor to your dishes. They also slightly change the texture of vegetables, so it's nice when we think about diversity and variety in our diets, think about how we can change up textures as well. And fermented foods also add nutrition, so things like folate and certain vitamins. So when a vegetable goes through that process of being fermented, there are some vitamins that are also produced. So we've talked a lot about what we should eat. So let's look a little bit at what we should try to avoid. Oh, okay, here we go. See, there's your gut microbiome holding a burger and soda, not looking very happy. So as much as we can, we should try to avoid processed foods. And this includes you know, things like crisps, biscuits, ready meals, frozen pizzas, processed meats as well, so salamis and things like that, processed cheeses, but also things like processed cereal, you know, those really sugary things, and, you know, marketers and advertisers are really good at making cereals look appealing and saying, you know, it's good for your gut health, or it's low in sugar and it's low in salt, but it's not very nutritious. So as much as we can, we should avoid processed foods. Because that doesn't feed our gut bacteria, you know, the foods that they like, and then that's when, you know, things kind of go downhill, and it affects our brain health and mental health as well. We should also avoid foods and drinks that are high in salt, high in sugar, high in saturated fats. So remember the SMILES trial, they very much promoted olive oil, which is an unsaturated fat. White flour, this is a really hard one for me because I do love bread and pastries, but we should do our best to avoid foods that are kind of made with white flour, so white bread, white pasta, white rice. And look, like I said, eating healthily is a journey, and especially with busy lifestyles, as well as just our food system generally, it's not always possible to completely avoid processed foods. So maybe what you can do is stick to the 90-10 rule. So if 90% of the time you eat all those things that we talked about, then 10% of the time is that just allows that room for a little bit of flexibility to fit your lifestyle and budget and so on. But especially for the uni students, try to avoid those super noodles if you can. Beatrice touched on this as well, but there are other lifestyle factors that influence our gut health. So it's not just about diet, but stress can influence our gut health in a negative way. So, it's important to practice mindfulness and practice different ways to maintain low levels of stress, exercise as well, make sure you get enough sleep, and spiritual resilience, as Beatrice so beautifully touched on as well. So when we think about gut health, it's not just a diet, but we have to take a holistic approach on what affects our gut. All right, I think given the climate that we are living in at the moment, culture, the kind of social climate, I think it'd be quite irresponsible of me to come here and tell you, you should be eating this food and that food without considering the fact that we are in the UK going through what people have called the cost of living crisis. We know that there are a lot of people in our community who are not able to access food, let alone healthy food. And so I just wanted to give you a few tips on how you can make sure that you do eat well and you feed your gut bacteria the food that it wants on a budget. So when we talk about eating lots of fruit and vegetables, they don't always have to be fresh. They can be frozen and or tinned. So, frozen fruit and vegetables are just as nutritionally adequate as fresh fruit and vegetables. Sometimes maybe even more so because they're, picked fresh and then frozen, whereas sometimes the fresh produce that makes it onto our plates has traveled for a long way away. It was picked a long time ago. So, don't forget frozen fruit and veg. And also, very convenient as well. On a really busy day, I might just get one of those packets that has like frozen carrots, onions, and celery and use that as a base for soup. Throw in some red lentils and some water and a bit of stock and, soup, lunch is ready. When we talk about legumes, we can have tinned or dry legumes, and I guess it kind of depends on on what you're cooking or the context of where you are. Sometimes tinned may save you more money because tinned legumes don't take as much time to cook, so they use up less energy. Because when we talk about the cost of living crisis, it's not just the cost of food that has gone up, but the cost of energy as well. So, take those things into account. If you are using dried legumes, some of them need to be soaked overnight. And again, that's just to kind of help reduce some of that cooking time and the energy that you're using up. Nuts can also be quite expensive. I think just the other day I saw in the news that the cost of peanut butter had gone up by like 25% or something. So eating seeds and nuts is, it's not a cheap thing to add to your diet. Generally, seeds are a little bit more affordable. So if you kind of have to choose, then you could go for the seeds if nuts are a bit too expensive. Another way that you can save money is to eat the things that are in season. And that might also mean that you could try and grow some of your own fruit and veg, which is really fun. And it's almost like a therapy in itself. For me, we only live in a flat and we've got a small balcony, but we've put as many pots out there as we can to grow our own food. That's another way that you can save money. And also remember the exposure to dirt that we talked about. It's good for your gut as well. And finally, you've probably heard this many times, but just planning your meals, taking a few minutes to take stock of what you have in your fridge and cupboard before you go shopping. And planning your meals isn't good just for your wallet, but also for your diet, because it can help you to kind of plan out how you can include those 30 different plant foods in your meals that week. So you can use a meal plan like the one that's going to go up on the screen to plan your meals for the week. And if you want to set a personal goal, so it could be that this week I want to focus on eating more fiber or eating more vegetables or, experiment with herbs and spices, flavors, whatever it may be, just planning out your meals can help just in that very practical way. Oh, it's gone. It'll come back up. Oh, yeah, there you go. There's the meal plan. But, you can do it however works for you. Just some final thoughts. So remember to feed on fiber, eat the rainbow, so include a lot of variety and diversity when it comes to the types of fruit and veg that you're eating. When we talk about gut health, it's not just food, but lifestyle, so stress, sleep, exercise, etc. And I would encourage you to start small. If your current diet is very far away from what has been described here today, you don't have to make all of these changes overnight. You could just start by having 1 or 2 extra portions of vegetables every day, have a little handful of nuts as a snack, and just work your way to whatever you want your diet to look like. A small change is better than no change. So don't feel like you have to go home and throw all your crisps away and go and do this big food shop. It really is just about making small changes. And we touched on this a little bit as well, but it's good not only for your physical, but your mental health as well to enjoy your food. So take time to eat mindfully. During the week, a lot of us maybe have to grab a sandwich in the car, or we end up eating at our desks while we're still working. That prevents us from really enjoying our food. And one thing that I didn't really touch on in the presentation, but what's also really good for your gut health is to chew your food properly, because the gut microbiome isn't just inside our tummies here, but it actually starts in the mouth. We've got bacteria in our mouths as well, and that's where digestion starts as well. So take time to enjoy your meals, chew your food properly, think about the different flavors and textures that you're experiencing, enjoy meals with others. play around with flavors and textures. If your diet is something that is a burden or something that you should do and it's not enjoyable, then that will have a detriment on your mental health as well. So make sure you enjoy your food. And on that note, are there any questions? All right, no questions. Then what we're going to do instead is, I wonder if anyone in the audience would be willing to share one thing that they're going to take away from this talk and try to implement in their diet in this coming week. Anyone? Yes? Keen to go and get some kimchi. You could also make your own as well. Fermenting foods is actually quite easy, and there's a lot of different cookbooks and just not even cookbooks, but recipes online that you could use. Thank you. Yes?
I'm going to go through the list of 30 vegetables.
Yeah.
I'm not going to overload myself or overwhelm. That would be a good starting point because I don't really have much variety of vegetables. I tend to include some, but I don't really use variety. So I'll try that one.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Yes?
I have to backtrack to the questions, I'm sorry. We eat lots of fruits. So for breakfast we usually have at least 5 different kinds.
Wow.
Can you have too much of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. The question is, we eat a lot of fruit in our diets. Can you have too many fruit? And I think that's a complicated question. And, Dr. Beatrice, please feel free to come in. But I would tend to say no. I would definitely recommend eating fruit over other foods that are high in sugar. So no, and fruit also are good sources of fiber and those kind of other antioxidants and things. So I would say no, but also try to incorporate more vegetables in your diet as well, if possible. Yeah. That's good. Okay, excellent. Any other questions or yes?
Yeah, I know one pasta who was lately a vegan, but by the end of the times, like the hair was falling out, and the doctors say you have to have red meat for you to balance.
Yeah. Yeah, so the question's about the vegan diet and a particular person who was, in the end, kind of told you should eat some red meat. So I think with the vegan diet, if it's a personal choice that you make, whether for ethical or other reasons, the vegan diet is something that you have to plan very carefully. There are certain micronutrients, so vitamins, that you don't get from a vegan diet, so you might have to consider supplementing. And there are some really key vitamins such as B12, which is also really important for brain health. That's one of the vitamins that you would have to definitely supplement on a vegan diet. You also have to think about calcium, iron. There is iron in foods such as spinach, for example, but it's the kind of iron, it's called non-heme iron, and it's less readily absorbed in the body. You can add something like vitamin C, so maybe some tomatoes or lemon juice or strawberries or something like that. And the vitamin C helps the iron to be a little bit better absorbed, but again, it's something that you might want to consider supplementing. So I think with the vegan diet, you have to be very careful that you don't become deficient in certain key nutrients. So you have to plan really well. And I think that the planning, is even more important to make sure that you're getting those key nutrients and or supplementing as well. Yeah. Yes.
I think it's important to follow up a bit on the juice question as well, because fruit juice obviously is considered as healthy, but
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, Beatrice. So yes, kind of going back to the fruit question. So eating fruit, because they've also got, the additional fiber and other things, that's really good. But when we talk about fruit juice, think about a glass of orange juice. It might take 2 or 3 oranges to make that glass, right? But you would never really be able to eat 2 to 3 oranges in one sitting, right? And of course, when you drink juice, then that fiber is lost, so that nutritional aspect of juice. Yes, and when we talk about hydration, we're advised to drink kind of 6 to 8 glasses of liquids per day. If you drink a smoothie or juice, try to limit it to 1 glass per day. Otherwise, it doesn't count towards your kind of 5 a day, but it's just extra sugar that is coming into your body. So yeah, be careful with fruit juices. And really, that's one of the things that we should try to limit. So when we talked about trying to avoid foods high in salt, sugar, fat, sugar, yes, try to limit how much fruit juice we drink. Thank you. Anything else? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is about fasting and intermittent fasting, and I think the evidence isn't quite strong enough yet to kind of suggest, how beneficial fasting is. What I would say is that our gut our gut bacteria work really hard, and it is good to give them a break as well, especially at night when we're sleeping. As Beatrice said, our body still very much is hard at work when we're sleeping, but it is good to give the bacteria a little break to, just from that digestion management that they do. But if personally you want to try fasting, especially intermittent fasting, then, and if it's something that's new to you, then perhaps what you could do is try to kind of think about the window of time when you eat, and you could try removing 1 hour from each end to begin with. Don't kind of shock your body into going straight into that fasting. And when you fast, make sure that you are still including all the nutrients and all the different foods that you need during that time when you are eating. So yeah, again, it's one of those things that if you choose to do, it requires some planning. I don't know, Beatrice, if you want to add anything. Yeah, vegetable juices, you can as well, but again, would recommend eating the whole vegetable because of the added kind of fiber benefits that come along with it as well. Yeah. Yes.
I'll try to eat the rainbow.
You'll try to eat the rainbow this week. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. So when, what are the best times of the day to eat? And I think that's a very individual thing. So there's a lot of research now that's being conducted into personalized nutrition. And remember, I talked about how our gut microbiome is unique to us, and the way our body metabolizes all different kinds of foods is very unique to us. So there's a really well-known professor, Tim Spector, at King's College, and they did a lot of research on twins. So they gave them different kind of ratios of protein, fats, carbs, to see how they were digested and metabolized. And even between twins, it was very different. So our bodies have been created to be very individual and unique. And even times of day or what you should eat at what time of day is very individual. And the research isn't quite there yet to provide people with that real personalized nutrition. It's close, it's getting there. There's also an additional dynamic of the interaction between our diet and our genes, and how certain genes affect how our body kind of absorbs and metabolizes foods, but also how food affects our genes as well. So there's a lot more research that needs to be done before this becomes mainstream. So I don't have a clear-cut answer for you, but it may be something that you want to explore with a nutritionist or a dietitian, or just kind of do some research and explore for yourself. Yeah. All right. So before we close, just wanted to tell you a little bit about what's on the menu after we finish. So, oops. Let me go back one. Okay. So what we've prepared for you today is an Asian-style bowl. So at the bottom, you'll have a mix of brown and white rice. And the reason we've done a mix is because I know brown rice can be an acquired taste. And so another way that you can slowly start incorporating more whole grains into your diet is to kind of start off by mixing with white rice first. We've got some roasted tofu that was marinated with some soy sauce, honey, sesame oil, and a little bit of vinegar, and a tiny bit of chili flakes. And we've got some grated carrots with skin on, but don't worry, they've been washed very well. Some steamed edamame and broad beans, and these were frozen, and they came in a pack that already had two kinds, so not just edamame, but broad beans as well, and just a little sprinkling of sesame seeds, just to show you how easy it is just to throw in some seeds in there on your meal to increase your plant points to get to that 30. So I hope you enjoy. These are my references as well, but I believe Isabel will have some closing thoughts. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Anna. This was fantastic, and I must say, I really love your little gut cartoon. I think it was brilliant. And as well, your advice to have a farm on a balcony, I know is research in progress. But you can probably later tell us all about, we can develop a small farm in our homes, even if they are very tiny. So I would like to give a special thanks to the speakers, Beatrice and her family in particular, because they came from far. And Anna, you didn't come from far, but you are, like Beatrice, very busy. And this, as I said, on Friday and Saturday, these ladies are amazing ladies with very busy careers, and then on the top of that, behind scenes, they provide a huge support to their husbands who also have very busy careers. So they are really, really amazing human, and I really, really appreciate the time that you gave us to prepare all this program. Before I finish as well, I would like to thank what I call, sorry, don't take my word for that, the invisible people, which are very critical as well. And this is like the Newbold Health Ministry people, the Newbold pastoral team. You know, we had, you might not know, but even Pastor Jan was on Friday running half of the country to make sure everything was ready for today. So this is all efforts that sometimes people, they don't realize. And as well, the Newbold technical team, you know, in order to be able to hear the speakers and things, they are the audio team, the visual team, the media team. So all these sort of logistics that are necessary to have all this in place. So very much thanks to all of you. And of course we finished, and I hope you can share this small program with your friends. And for those who are here with us at Newbold Church, don't go away yet, because as Anna said, we have a small treat for you. Thank you for your participation.